Oh, hey everybody, David here. I didn't have time to create an intro the way I would like to for this topic. And so usually this is what we're talking about, but that's not what we're talking about tonight. So we're not going to be talking about money or making money or becoming wealthy or health other than relationships. So I'm just getting this ready here. All right. So I'm probably going to take my hat off because it's late and I want to get comfy, but we'll do that here in a second. So let me you probably can't read this, but every one of these little purple things here is a project. And every time where you see the word POTU or DDTC, those are like complete massive projects onto themselves. Each one of those is a project folder. And then there's this stuff down here, which I just didn't have time to organize. And this is just within Living Writer. This has nothing to do with like AutoCrit or Grammarly, which I have a whole bunch of other things, or Google Drive times like 3 or 4 different project accounts. So yeah, and this stuff is just like within the last year or so. And but tonight we're going to be talking about relationships. In fact, before I get into this, I need to close this other thing down before I start getting resource shortage warning messages. So just give me 1 second here. All right. So this is unscripted, and so I'm only sending this out just to my YouTube channel. I've got the capability to send this out to 5 different streams, but I'm trying to build up this particular channel around this concept because it combines. In fact, this hat's driving me crazy, so I'm gonna just take it off. I got my headband behind here, so I'm transforming from this dude into kind of, I don't know, hippie dude. I mean, a lot of folks know me with this kind of look, and I really do a great Santa. So I like this because I don't have to worry about these falling off. Um, and All right. So I'm not gonna be throwing a lot of fancy things. I mean, I can do sound effects and cool, and maybe we'll do that. But what this is really about for me is kind of a brain dump of sorts. Let me see if I can maximize this. Can I make this bigger? Part of the problem is sometimes when I do things in one area. Oh, there we go. That's so I'm trying to make this. I didn't have enough time to make this document into a real document that I want to make available as a reference. Okay. So if you want these notes, or this outline, just let me know. Reach out to me on Facebook or something. Um, just let me know. This will probably be a course. I literally outlined this during my breaks at work this evening. Um, so I've been inspired to. So if you go back, if you go onto Facebook or some other places, you'll find some live streams where I've talked about relationships, like people in my life, friends and family, go through relationship stuff. And usually when that happens, I'm inspired to do one aspect of this presentation, this concept. Most of my life, I've been a consultant. So I have like this massive toolbox of knowledge and experience. In fact, I'm going to move. This is kind of weird because I can see myself over there and I'm tempted to see how I'm looking, but I really need to like move things over here. So I'm going to adjust the camera and just give me a moment. Well, I know this is kind of weird. All right. Just hold on. There's just too much pressure on that. There. Okay. I think that's stable. And let me bring up my other notes over here. Yeah, I've got two big monitors, and I really probably need a third. And I need a lighting source that shines up because these are like overhead. I can control those a little bit. All right. So anyway, so I've friends and family go through this occasionally. I'm gonna drink some water because my voice gets dry from talking. And the purpose of this is severalfold. Is most likely the people that I think inspired this um, probably will never watch it, but that's on them, not me. Um, but maybe I'm wrong, right? And I literally have a list of people, not just one. So if you think that I'm doing this for you, you're probably right, but you're not the only person. I can think of about 10 people in the back of my mind right now when I was working on this. I literally have a list and a little notepad I was thinking about, and that helped me shape the types of things I want to talk about. And some of the stuff you'll hear me throw out um, here and there and stuff like that. So let's get into it. So we're going to start with like dating and finding, right? And I did a whole master class, I don't know, a few months ago about, breakups and restarting your life type of thing. And that all by itself was a whole master class. So I'm going to be moving kind of fast here. Okay. So I'm going to be reading the topic, giving my commentary, moving on to the next. Okay. Because I could spend the rest of the day. It's a new day. It's 12:30, and I could talk until 12:30 tomorrow, and I would not cover all the things here. I would put you to sleep. Okay. You have no idea how many times I've gotten the call in the middle of the night over the last, I don't know, 20, 30 years, different age groups, different genders, men, women, different religious belief systems, relationship stuff, business disasters, financial disasters, but relationships is a big piece of it. I've seen really good relationships that didn't need to die, be destroyed, including in my own life. I've seen and experienced, I mean, right now there's revolutions of happening in dating. The war between the sexes is back on, and it's worse than it was before. And and I'm going to show some references, some things where men and women can go listen to some things, and there's good and bad out there, right? And you know, I live in America, so I mean, if you're living in a region where you have a cloistered belief system or a cloistered set of processes for relationship, you're probably doing all right. You probably have better results than we do in America with freedom. And I'm not going to deep dive into that, but I'm a real advocate of data driven decision making. You know what's kind of cool is we have the data on what a good and successful relationship does and happy. What is success? Success isn't whether or not you've gotten a divorce. Success is, did you navigate life? Were you happy? You know, how did you live your life at the end? You know, too often people survive, the kids leave, and then there's a divorce. It's just so common. And I don't think it needs to be that way. And I believe I have an understanding of why it's that way. I would upset a lot of folks if I were to explain why. And I'll touch on some of it. But uh, you know, I've done it all wrong, and I've had it done wrong to me. I have uh, I have experienced stuff, and in where you are in the cycles of life, right? So, like, if you're a preteen, that's a cycle of life. Then there's a teenager, young man, young woman cycle, right? You become an adult, and then there's this another cycle, and there's biology involved, right? Last data I saw, a man's sexual prime is age 16. A woman's sexual prime is what, age 28 to 30, 33. Don't ask me why. It just is what it is. There's all this data. There's these things that we know, obscure pieces of information that impact us, right? Like when a woman and man have sexual intercourse, there's a neurochemical bond that happens with the woman for about 3 weeks. It's only about 3 days for the man. Either side of that coin goes, "Huh, well, that explains a lot." Yeah, it does, right? The thing is if you wanna be successful navigating life, you can't ignore the data that we have learned, okay? I'm just gonna throw that out there. If you're relying on information, data, and principles that were written up thousands of years ago by people who didn't have access to the data you have today, you're probably setting yourself up for failure. I'll just throw it out there, not calling anyone out. One of my pet peeves as an author, as someone who has written his own life navigational process, is we give our power to create our future. We give that power to the past, to people who are long dead, who were living in horrific times where every atrocity was okay. And we have accepted that stuff, and we let the dead rule our present. And it just, we have cycles, and we evolve as a species, but it hurts us, and it hurts us in our relationships. And so let's get into it. No lack of love, running the numbers. So there's what, about 8 billion people, right? So half those, let's just say half, right? So there's 8 billion. So half that would be 4 billion, right? And let's say you're looking for, so if you're looking for one out of a billion, there's four. They might just have been born, but there's four. If you're looking for one out of a million, that's about what, 4,000? There's 4,000 people that would be your one out of a million. I mean, just looking at the data, there's no lack of love. We're born and raised in our culture to find the one, that one true love, blah 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 blah. The truth is there's no lack of love. There's no lack of finding sex. There's no lack of any of that. Now, some people would argue that with me and things like that, but that's another conversation. We're not going to get into that. This is not about tactics or techniques for manipulation or any of that sort of thing. That's all been done. Women know how to manipulate men. Men know how to manipulate women. And those that don't will seek out the information and learn it, and we'll just perpetuate hurting each other through that stuff. Not that it doesn't work. It works. Okay. We're all vulnerable to mind control manipulation tactics and stuff. Just look around, right? Um, but it doesn't lead to happiness. It doesn't lead to the kind of relationship that you want. Most people don't even really know what they want in a relationship. They want to be happy. They don't even know what that means. It's, it's probably good sex. Everyone has their own sexual fetishes that no one wants to talk about. So they want to have safety to be able to be that in their relationship. They want to be able to talk about stuff. They want support. There's this thing, maybe not defined yet in most people's minds, because usually when we get into relationships, it's all about what we find attractive. Well, Mother Nature has different priorities than your happiness, right? It's the perpetuation of the species, right? Breeding, right? So, uh, and we have created all sorts of weird things around it, weird beliefs, weird religions, weird ideologies, weird rules. Don't have time to get into all of it. I'm just saying, look around our planet. We got a lot of weirdness. But numerically, if you're looking for that one special relationship that's one in a million, there's 4,000. So if you let go of scarcity, that might take a little pressure off. Well, how do you find Mr. and Ms. Right? In the resources, I have a little thing in here, references and entertainment. In the book, it's called Homo Deus. It's a weird little title. Anyway, there's a short chapter in there about AI before AI actually was a thing, and it's a whole concept. In fact, when I share my story about how Diana and I found each other in the context that I've held and she's held for the last 6 going on 7 years, we've had an amazing run. It hasn't been perfect, but it's, compared to any other relationship either of us have had, it's been stunning. But in the processes I'm talking about here is what kind of like I deployed. And some of what I've learned here is also things that I learned the hard way. All right. So numerically, you know, it's not, there's no lack. Okay, finding versus becoming. So everything's about finding. And what's really cool is because I've got some references here. I'm going to switch over here. like Love is Blind, Marriage at First Sight, really interesting social science type experiments where every time I watch these shows, I'm like wanting to be a consultant. It's like, let me end this show. Let me work with folks before, during, and after, and you have whole different outcomes. And then some other things called like sex education, sexify, not sexophile, sexify. I didn't have time to look them up and verify. And then another one I just started watching, which is hilarious, Alpha Male, something like that. So the point is we're finding, and that doesn't work. You're never going to find Miss or Ms. Right. If you doubt that, look at all the billionaires that just got divorced and lost half their assets. What? Yeah, most successful men in the world didn't work. They weren't able to hold a relationship together. His fault, her fault, does it really matter? Right? Some of them built empires and then divorced. Why? Well, probably because they didn't have me coaching them and they didn't have these contexts to hold. They're born and raised into peasant mindedness. They overcame it, became successful, very wealthy. But I've noticed that fame and fortune, all it does is enable the ability to weaponize and abuse each other in amazing things. Doubt that, just go watch any of the Johnny Depp stuff. Wow. Talk about what a little bit of money and power can enable. But hey, there's it's a billion-dollar industry. You're in pain and suffering that profits off from that. And if you got children, yeah, man, keeping your children in abusive situations and recurring stress and the need for counseling and the need for psychological evaluations and going back to court every 2 years, it's a $4 to $5 billion a year industry. Yeah, it's huge. It's weaponized. It's kind of like food, weaponized against you. In fact, I'll be honest with you. If you were born and raised, especially in America, the odds of you having a successful relationship are probably less than one half of 1%. And my measure is happiness is the success measure. It's not whether or not you've got a divorce. You've got the religions that have the highest stay together rates, right? I think now it went from a 52% success rate to a 48% success rate for the first marriage based on the data, right? Don't argue about how yours is better. Just let's look at the data and you'll probably find out, oh, it's not, right? And it depends on whether you're a man's point of view or a woman's point of view. I can explain to you why certain religions it's really cool to be a man, not so cool to be a woman. I can explain why. And a lot of times, we men who are empowered, we don't really, we're empowered. I'm the head. Woman's the neck that directs the head. I heard that recently. I'm like, oh my God, really? Seriously? Yeah, I remember a dear friend of mine. I was his best man and laying that on them as a speech about, he's the head and she's the neck that directs the head thing. Vertical alignment. Sound familiar? Yeah, it works provided, yeah, the odds of the man actually fulfilling the role as per prescribed is very, very unlikely because he doesn't even understand what that means. I recently went to a wedding where they had the obey, and the person leading it were talking about looked at the dude and says, "Are you willing to be crucified for her?" I'm like, "Well, there's a way of putting it, right?" Talking about sacrifice. Yeah. So it's just like, well, that puts it in perspective, right? And I mean, the dude was kind of right, like really based on what he was using in the wedding ceremony, he was kind of like right on the money. But man, talk about brutality. I don't think any man is getting into a relationship wanting to end that way. However, that happens to them in court. Oh, right? Yeah. Yeah, interesting. So there's some resources there about that because right now there are women teaching women really bad, nasty, manipulative things that would violate the golden rule. And can't necessarily blame them because they're kind of fighting back against men who are kind of have the upper hand yet again legally now too. We haven't ratified equal rights in America, and not only that, we've taken away women's rights. So you can rape a woman and force her to have your child. There you go. Mother Nature wins, right? And in some states, it would be against the law for her to not carry her rapist baby, right? Because rapist DNA has greater rights than her rights. I mean, seriously, wherever you stand legally, it's just like, that isn't that something between a woman and a man and their God, not the state or the government. And keep in mind that there's no government funding goes for that stuff, right? That was handled a long time ago, right? Freedom, liberty, pursuit of happiness, except if you're a woman, right? We men don't think about it because we don't have to deal with it. We just have our paychecks garnished and stuff like that, right? Yeah, so we need to get this relationship stuff handled. Otherwise, we're going to perpetuate this very dark, evil system of exploitation and predatory practices, which is leading to abnormal behaviors and harming of men and women, which create men and women who are really damaged. Where that now has to be factored into the concept of dating, which makes dating kind of dangerous. And the truth is, if you invest yourself into a relationship, it's a 2 to 3 year cycle to heal after a significant relationship ends. And that significant relationship and those bonds of intimacy can be formed within minutes or days if there's connection there in a 2 or 3 year healing process. So if you don't get the dating piece right, to do it by the numbers and by the data, between ages 20 and 30, you've got 3 tries. Most people don't do that. They don't understand the neurochemical addictions that we have. So we bounce from one relationship to another, but like a heroin addict for the next fix, because that addiction, that shattering when a relationship ends, is more powerful than the withdrawal symptoms of heroin. And I would cite the research done by the book, The Journey from Abandonment to Healing. It's a book that I usually hand out, or I've literally read to friends over the phone off and on over the last 20 years when they're facing a breakup because they don't understand the cycle, the timelines. They don't have the roadmap. We have a roadmap. Anyway, finding versus becoming. You're not going to find this. The story behind this is I was part of a men's team and I was on a point leadership team. And one of the men, I'm not going to say his name for confidentiality reasons, he came up with this idea. He wanted to find the woman of his dreams and he had 90 days to do it. And we spent 2 or 3 hours hammering it out. There was just something not right with that as a goal. And the reason why, because there's no way he could control finding the woman of his dreams. So what we came up with, and somewhere in my notes, I think I have the exact thing, but I've changed it and reworked this over the years. My version of that, and the one that I used myself, I actually spent 3 years. Um, I spent 3 years, was it 9 years ago, 10 years? I was like 48, 49 when I made this decision, 47. But I spent 3 years where I wouldn't really date anybody. I was abstinent for the first time in my life, right? Because I realized I didn't know anything about relationships. I was really bad at choosing my partners and mates, all of which were really quality human beings, but I wasn't or whatever. But anyway, so what we came up with was, and what I came up with for myself was, I am the man the woman of my dreams will recognize as hers. Now, from a woman's perspective, it would be, I am the woman the man of my dreams will recognize as his. Now, what's really kind of funny about that is because I had come off a very significant relationship. I wasn't ready to date. I had a plan. I knew about the 3 year cycle. I had this thing called Rule of Three. Don't have time to get into it. It's a whole process for healing and decision making, like when to end a relationship. As a process type of relation. There's this thing called Rule of Three. If hit me up. You could probably even be able to find it because I've been publishing it for like 20 years here and there. I need to actually formally publish it, but the thing is I created a profile where I wanted to use psychology and I wanted to use algorithms to help me screen my dating pool, right? There's 8 billion people. I know there's 4,000, one in a millions for me. How do I find just one of those that live in America when there's only 150, no, 300 million people living in America, 150 million possibilities? How do I narrow that dating pool using algorithms and science? That was my question. So there was only one dating app available for me. It wasn't a swipe right or swipe left. It was one that cost actually a significant amount of money and had a lot of psychology profiling questions, most of which were out of date and some of which were really weird. But it was what it was, and it was very it 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 was the process. I chose a process, and I already spent 3 years becoming. I kind of literally knew who she was, right? I spent a lot of quality time deciding who is the woman of my dreams, right? And it wasn't whether or not she was this height, weight, ratio, color, eyes, boobs, hips, legs, all that. It wasn't about those things were okay. I've got my preferences and things, but there were some really much deeper things that were way more important to me in that because I have dated the tens and I have been in relationship with tens and I've been in relationship with twos and it was never about that. It was all about for me, and everyone's different, but for me, there needed to be connection at a mental, emotional level. Maybe it's because my physical appearance and stuff like that's important to a certain degree, but to me, I've discovered it's not everything. And when I think back over some of my best relationships, um, they weren't necessarily the most beautiful in terms of physicality type of things. Anyway, don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole. The point is I knew who she was. I spent a lot of quality time getting to know myself. And then I asked myself, well, who do I need to be in order for her to even recognize that I'm hers? Right. And I spent 3 years becoming that guy. And I was an imperfect dude. I had a lot of strengths and weaknesses, and I had a lot of growing to do, and I did. And that led to a lot of learning experiences. And but that was my process. Oddly enough, when I was using this app and filling out my profile and things and dealing with the inadequacies of the platform, Diana noticed me. She recognized there was something different going on with this guy that was showing up in her list of possible matches. It's just like, if you're into manifesting or, all of that stuff, right? The secret type stuff. I mean, it's textbook. I mean, it's just like literally she recognized me. And then on our first date, it was like 3 dates in one, and we recognized each other. And my plan, my logical plan, my time, I had a timeline. I could have made a Gantt chart for my next relationship. And my first decision was whether or not I was going to want to have another relationship. And I decided that I was going to be open to that. And um, never looked back. Just things flowed. Um, but it wasn't even about luck. It wasn't about me finding her. I was data driven. I used the tools that were available to me, but I spent 3 years working on myself first. And then I learned some hard lessons and I was willing, I'm in my 40s and my 50s. I was willing to become a better man. And that was after doing some stuff like the Sterling Institute of Relationships, the New Frontier, and all sorts of other stuff. Um, all right. I also want to point out that probably about the only person who might be baggage free is a 13-year-old who grew up in a happy home. After that, unlikely. And most kids today are born and raised such a way that even when they start dating, they have a lot of baggage based on what they experienced as children because they were born and raised into parenting systems that are rooted in violence. Parents will argue this with me. That's fine. I've raised my own, and I've been a stepdad, and I've also been associated with the foster system, and I've seen a lot. And I'll just simply say that we have to stop giving our authority and our power over to long dead people who didn't know what the hell they were doing, but thought it was cool enough to wrote up things as if they were commandments from the Almighty. When we have the data that says, nope, that was wrong. We know slavery was wrong. So if we could figure out that slavery was wrong and was never ordained and was never, there's no justifying it ever, right? It violates the golden rule, right? Um, don't even try to those who have argued with me have either run away mad or dropped to their knees bawling because I made them realize what dicks they were throughout their entire lives and all the people they've harmed because of their bad perspectives. And they're not bad people, just that no one had enough balls to really dig into the meaning of what it is that they thought they believed in. And I've given up doing that to people. Like 20 years ago, I stopped doing that. It was a power trip for me. Um, I just there's I would rather help you ask yourself the questions and then figure it out versus getting in your face and then just making you realize that we have all we have all been born and raised into a lot of bad stuff, in my opinion. Not everybody, just about everybody. The odd the odds of you finding somebody who hasn't been subjected to some form of mental, emotional, physical, or sexual domestic violence or abuse or expose it, and if you've been witness to it, it's pretty much the same psychology and the data as if you've experienced it, not the same level. Okay. So for those of you that have experienced level 10 domestic violence, not take away from that. It's not the same. I not taking away your pain and suffering from you at all, but it impacts people. It creates baggage. Okay. None of us, the odds of you winning the lottery are probably higher than you meeting someone who hasn't. The reality is most people don't know that they are survivors. That's part of the problem, right? Some do, right? Especially those that have experienced the hardcore stuff. But a lot of folks are survivors of some kind of domestic violence abuse and they don't know it. I was, and I didn't know it. I was literally tortured by a sibling as a kid. I was tickled until I was screaming, and I had my this hand bent backwards until I was screaming in pain. And he was an adult. Probably should have been put to jail. This was right outside my mom's window. No one came to rescue me. This went on for a long time, sunshiny day. I can remember. I never hated the guy, right? Never feared him. In fact, he was my brother on my dad's side. He's dead. I can talk about it now. Not a bad man. He didn't know any better. Probably because I didn't even have the memory till after he was dead. But that is one. I had another issue where I was tied up in a basement. I was in terror as a toddler. I was literally tied to a post in a basement, a dark basement. So, I mean, that's not like I know people that have been like level 10 sexually abused and beaten, all sorts of crazy crap and incest and stuff. And I don't, I don't know, I don't know how they function, but it's amazing the healing capability that we have. It's not to compare stories. My whole point here is we have to get past judging ourselves and others. We have to become aware of the reality for which we are as a species. That beautiful person sitting across the table from you, no matter what the age is, it's probably got baggage. And you've probably got baggage. And relationship wise, part of that relationship is finding someone where it's safe to unpack it and safe to heal. And most people never get there in the relationship ever. Just an observation. All right. Pretty heavy, huh? Let's move on to the next. Foundations for relationship. Now, I keep coming back to this, and I've got friends for a long time now. When they split up, I usually throw this out there. I've said there's two things I've concluded: willingness and reciprocation, and immediately either person. Sometimes I'm talking to both persons because I'm friends with both people at the same time. They will identify either their or the other or their mutual either willingness or lack of reciprocation in something important to them. It boils down to a willingness. It could be a willingness to grow. It could be a willingness to get a budget together. It could be a willingness to explore sexual fetishes. It could be a willingness to take care of one's health. It could be willingness to go to a doctor. I literally know somebody that went through a relationship situation where the person had severe sleep apnea and wouldn't do anything about it. Wouldn't go into a doctor, wouldn't get a CPAP. Family knew about it. It was crazy. It's a lack of willingness to take care of themselves. It ended the relationship. It was just part of it, and it was just craziness. Shout out, you know who you are. Love you. And then there's reciprocation. So, a lot of ideologies and religious belief situations, it's a one-way street in terms of respect and power, right? Right? You don't have to agree with me. It is what it is, right? But it doesn't work because it harbors resentment. I don't care what your holy work has to say. I don't know. I don't care what the command is. A human being, whether it be a man or a woman, is a human being, right? If he knows the only reason why she is with him is because of the command of their belief system, now he knows it's not because she loves him, and that will destroy him as a man inside of him. It will fester in him unless he becomes a narcissistic sociopath and becomes a fascist in his own home. And then that turns into abuse, which is justified, right? Yeah. I'm sorry that my brother beats you, but he is my brother. I mean, seriously, color purple. I mean, we have so, regardless of the belief system, it wasn't that long ago, and there is a movement to want to return to that. It is what it is. That war is ongoing. Willingness and reciprocation. Now, what I didn't get into here is I didn't get to it, and I need to write it in here. Apologize for this. I'm glad I caught this because this is probably more important than anything. It's holding context. Now, art divine. All right. Let me explain this because not everyone agrees with this or believes this type of thing. So there is a 72. If you're in America, there's a 72% that you were born and raised with some kind of affiliation with Christianity, right? And then there's another like 20% chance that it was some aspect of a Abrahamic religion, right? And then of that, what is it like? Half that would be views Jesus as a great prophet type of thing. So, what is one of the things that Jesus has said? And I don't want to get all biblical here, okay? That's not my way, right? But because of the audience, I want to. He challenged. He quoted something from the Old Testament, right? He challenged. Are you not gods? So how can you be a sheep? How can you be less than an ant? How can you be all these things? How can you be like a childlike fool if you're supposed to be a god? Hmm. In fact, I could write a whole book on this concept because I always thought it was interesting when Jehovah revealed his name to Moses. I thought it was a really interesting name. I thought it was really interesting that we're all supposed to be Christ-like in that belief system. Well, what was Christ like? Was he a sheep? No. What was he? He was a God. My father and I are one. Is it possible that you and your father are one? I mean, there's a lot of questions there. And the big thing was Master, teach us how to pray. Well, I thought it was interesting that they addressed him as Master, so that was kind of interesting. Um, but the first two words of the prayer was what? Okay, Catholics, come with me. You know this, right? Our Father. Stop. See, that bothered me because early on, I was like, well, it should be my father because he hadn't died yet. No one was able to accept Jesus as their personal Lord and Savior. So therefore, they couldn't make that claim. But yet here he was still alive. And he says, no, it's our Father. That brings into a whole lot of ugly questions that I'm not going to get into. Now, what does that have to do with relationships? So I was not looking for a mortal woman. I kind of was done with that. So, for my animistic brothers and sisters, which covers a lot, right? Including all pagans, witches, druids, blah, 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 um, or indigenous beliefs. Or even, it was kind of interesting. I was watching a show about something about Italy, the roll, oh, shoot, lost in my brain. But the pasta, the rolled pasta, it's a belly button of Athena inspired that. I mean, all the pastas is all about goddess stuff. Anyway, it's interesting. Predates most of the religions as we know it today. Our obsession with the goddess is a good thing, I think. And for some reason, we try to erase her. But my translation of what Jesus has tried to say was, "Are ye not divine?" That's a better statement, right? Because it's more inclusive, right? I know. All the chauvinists just are screaming, right? Oh, that's another conversation for another day. I would put you in your place by letting you know that the Ten Commandments says, "Thou shalt not have any other gods before me." And I would give you a clarification that, first of all, it uses the word gods, plural, and it's a pecking order. It's not the denial of any other gods, because you are one of them, by the way, according to the challenge in the Old Testament and the New Testament. But there's no mention of goddess. And that's actually kind of interesting if you look into Kabbalah. I'll save you a lifetime of learning, means to receive, and how that first 5 books are written as a codex. And anyway, it's interesting stuff. It's interesting stuff. If you want to spend a couple of years in that rabbit hole, you might learn a few interesting things. But the point is, if we agree to equal rights, it doesn't mean that men and women are totally equal. Like, men can't have babies naturally, right? I guess women right now can have children without men. Now they're figuring that out through science. But just through the natural concepts, right? Isn't it logical, equal pay for equal work, right? But we didn't define a woman's role in a man's life as being equal to the family or the home. There's been a lot of injustices done to women. We've enslaved them. We've made them less than. And it wasn't always that way. Kind of interesting. It wasn't always that way. We've uncovered in archaeology whole cultures that were amazing, advanced, and very peaceful. Yeah. So it didn't have to be that way. It didn't have to be this way. We're reclaiming our human history, going back to previous epoch even. So let's say that we have equality. Jehovah, by the way, had a wife, right? Israeli archaeologists have uncovered her, right? Yeah. Jehovah didn't create all this by himself. Sorry. If you didn't know, at least the ancient Jews, she existed. She has a name, everything. Statuary. Don't trust me. Verify. Don't trust anyone. Verify. Do your own research. It's reasonable, right? All of nature shows us that to create new life, that's the coming together of their male and female, right? That's just what we observe, right? So kind of makes sense. There's a lot of things that make sense if you think about it, but our thought processes have been usurped by other people perpetuating long dead ideas and concepts from long dead people who are ruling over our lives and our world with war, conflict, death, and disease, and all sorts of other sorts of stuff. So thou art divine. So if you were to walk into a pagan circle, you'd probably be greeted at the tip of a sword or the point of a knife, an athame, and you'd be greeted, thou art God, or thou art goddess, depending on your gender identification. It doesn't matter what you actually are, and how you present yourself. And then you'd be asked, how do you enter? You may not be allowed to enter depending on how you answer. Because if you're not entering in perfect love and perfect peace, you probably don't, you're not allowed into a sacred circle of the divine. Kind of an interesting concept, right? Yeah, I thought it was powerful. So, what does it have to do with this relationship stuff? Good question, right? Well, I wasn't looking for a woman. I was looking for a goddess. I was looking for a goddess awake. Or I was looking for a woman who had that willingness where the goddess was awakening within her. Huh. I already knew I already accepted my title. I had a hard time accepting it when Jesus was talking about it, right? Are you not gods? It's like, no, I'm not a god. I'm a fallible human. I'm a sinner. I'm a this. I'm a that. I'm unworthy, right? I'm unworthy. I'm unworthy. I'm unworthy. I'm unworthy. I need you. Please save me from the horrors of hell. Blah 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 blah. And all that gaslighting crap. No, it took me a long time to overcome the spiritual abuse that I was born and raised with, and then indoctrinated into throughout life. It took me a long time to view myself as a divine being. Am I the ultimate creator? I wish I was, because I could just clip my fingers or wiggle my nose and change a lot of things. But I've accepted myself as being divine. And I could theorize a lot of different things there. That's not important. I view her as sacred. Yeah, that's the context. In fact, when I was dating her, or any woman, after I figured this context out, it changed how I viewed all women. I have a story behind that I won't get into. I said hello once, and I had a spiritual experience. And all my relationships with men and women changed after that. It was more impactful than anything that any of the mainstream religions ever delivered to me. So, I see the divine feminine, the goddess within all women, regardless of their age. All women are my sisters. All women are my mother. All women are my grandmother. All women are my daughter. And they can be in that role at any given moment in time. Men reciprocating the same thing. They could be my son, they could be my brother, they could be my father, they could be my grandfather. No matter what their age is, there's a divinity there that shines through. And when I recognized that, it changed all my relationships. It's like the word namaste. A dear friend of mine who I'm hoping is watching this is literally tattooed on his arm. If I was guessing, what I just said was like a lightning bolt. And I hope it was. Because if you're wondering what was missing, what I've been talking about is, I hope you're getting it. Just my gut instinct. So, except for the one person I've chosen to be in my life. Now, if you're in a poly and all this sort of stuff, there's no judgment there. There was a group of hippies that formed a community, and they bought land together, and they created a very successful farm, everything. And they ended up having children and pairing off in a monogamous relationship and dividing the land and building homes and creating a neighborhood and community together. We've got data on it. I've come to my own personal conclusion that the end result is monogamy, not by command or decree. We just trend towards it. I think we like it. Is it a hard rule? No, no. I seen one successful relationship, two dudes and one woman, and she's an amazing human, and the men involved were amazing too. Um, I heard of one dude. It was very isolated things, but a lot of times it's just a lot of pain and suffering. It's just people working through their suitcases of baggage and their various traumas and things. But I don't know. I know that it's not for me. Except for me when I was younger, it sounded really, really cool. But just yeah, I think it's cool that we have the freedom to explore it, and I would never deny someone that. I just think in the end, um, we just like to have that closeness. Can one person fulfill all of our whatevers? Probably not. But it's not about that, and a lot of it's cycle of life stuff too. So it's where I don't have time to get into all of that. But the context I held with Diana and actually the former relationship was "Thou art divine," and actually quite a long time to really get some depth understanding that. Same thing with my relationship with men. I have enemies, male and female, but I don't hate them. I just view them as somebody that is like, it's not safe, right? And the highest martial art is transforming an enemy into a friend. So I try to practice that art. It's much easier to go after revenge and hurting and things like that. So when I hold the context of, let's say, Diana being divine, how do I approach the divine? Do I scream at the divine? Do I beat the divine? Do I abuse the divine? No. My very relationship is an act of worship. That's the context. Most people don't hold that. They want to be worshipped. I've stood in a circle of young men talking about stuff that young men talk about, teenagers, and they're like, really talking about women in a very disrespectful way. And I kind of joined in, and some of them might actually be watching this. Ha! Wouldn't that be funny? They might remember this, but I can't go into the language or what was said. But I remember looking at one of the men and saying, "Well, you really enjoy being treated like a god, correct?" And oh yeah, hell yeah, man. And I says, "Well, I'm going to give you a piece of advice. Before you ever accept worship from any woman, you as the man, if you want to be treated like a god, you need to reciprocate and actually initiate and treat her like a goddess first." And this whole group of young men just went silent. It was cute. And consider that. I said, "Otherwise, what are you doing?" Because no god would dishonor himself with a mortal woman, and no goddess would dishonor herself with a mortal man. This isn't about abstinence or no sex before. It's not about any of that sort of thing. Why would you waste your time? Yeah, I have a whole chapter I could write about that stuff. When you tune in to your value and worth as divine, sex you won't be satisfied with sex anymore. Not with a mortal. Not interested. Yeah. It's kind of interesting because when you hold that context, I mean, I was in a movie theater with Diane on a date, and she just put her hand on my shoulder. It was a non-sexual thing. And it was one of the most intensely intimate moments because it was a sacred expression of trust. And that happened to me once before in my life. Kind of weird. Not going to get into that story. But anyway, you're divine. You want to know why your relationships are failing? You want to know why? It's because you're not holding the right context. You're not willing and you're not reciprocating. And a lot of that is inner work. Because if you can't accept yourself as a divine being, how can you expect to be treated like one? And vice versa. Minds go, yeah, thou art divine. So, willingness and reciprocation. So, where are areas that people get messed up, where it's not safe? Communications, respecting each other, sex, sexuality, fetishes, acceptance, mental, emotional, spiritual support, finances, trust, unpacking, healing the past. All boils down to willingness and reciprocation. And are you holding the context? Divine. You know, within every single man, there's a little 6-year-old boy and a 13-year-old boy, right? Girls, ladies, is it safe for him to come out? Men, every woman, there's a 6-year-old girl, 12-year-old, 13-year-old. Is it safe for her? It's usually not. And sometimes it never will be because other people have betrayed that trust so deeply. I'm thinking of one person where I almost was there. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that one either. All right. Is it safe to communicate? Is it safe for the past to be known? This is not just about body counts. Well, that's part of it. You know, I've talked to guys about this. You know, they're just, I was born and raised in an area where laying pipe was the thing, right? And I've coached or talked to folks. They've had a breakup. Yeah, man, they're going to go out back there, man. They're going to get back in the groove. They're going to just, lay a lot of pipe, blah blah blah. And I listen and blah 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 and stuff. And then I kind of lay some of this stuff on him. I said, well, let me get this straight. So, the woman of your dreams. So she's out there laying a lot of pipe right now. Oh, no, she's not. No, she's saving herself for me. Oh. Okay, so you're expecting something from her that you're not willing to be yourself. Like that's going to work? Hmm. So you have your first date with somebody and just, explaining what you're looking for a relationship, right? A lot of folks are just looking to get laid, right? And that's fine. Again, it's a cycle of life thing, age thing, whatever. As long as it's disclosed, right? But other people, maybe they'll say they're gaming, whatever. It's complicated. I get it's complicated. But let's say it's just you have two people that are actually looking for a relationship. They're disclosing the truth. If you're sitting across from me and I'm telling you, well, I've had these relationships, and at this age, 3 years ago, this relationship came to an end, and I hold this context. I'm not looking for that. Well, when's the last? Whatever it is, it's like that part of my life is for her. That part of her life is for him. Who is him? I haven't met him yet. I haven't met her yet. That's a pretty big context. I'll tell you, if you lay that context out there, I can tell you from a man's perspective, women will want to be that. And so you could abuse that. I wouldn't. But if it was sincere and you were to say, no, not until we reach that, it's not about a religious thing. It's not about that. It's about realizing that that level of intimacy, that you are bringing something to the relationship that's sacred. It's like drugs, magic mushrooms. It's a sacred thing. A lot of folks don't realize that these things, people would spend a week in preparation or 2 weeks, and it would be supervised by a shaman, and they would have these amazing experiences, right? But they treat it as sacred. There's a difference between sacred use and abuse. And right now, we basically abuse just about anything and everything that used to be sacred. So I'm just like, bring it back to being sacred. That's just me. Okay. That's what I'm teaching. If it doesn't resonate for you, that's okay. You'll probably eventually come back to it. Most people lie because they believe it's not safe for the truth to be known or to tell the truth. I attribute this to my son Matthew when he was like a toddler, like age 4. Great little story. He asked me about sometime. He asked me, why do people lie? I spent half a day thinking about it. It's because people don't believe it's safe to tell the truth, and usually it's not safe for the truth to be known. So communication stresses, how do we communicate? How do we resolve conflict? Well, I recommend NVC, nonviolent communication. It's a learned format. It's something you can practice. It works great with teenagers. I've had teenagers. I've used it on teenagers and even teenagers that were resistant to it. And as one of them said, holy F, I can't believe this worked. Anyway, they're now adults. Every relationship should have like an operating agreement. It's a prenuptial kind of thing, but this is an operating agreement. Most people don't. It's like, how do we handle stuff? Right? Like if you start feeling angry, right? If you were to spend $1,000 on counseling, they would train you to walk away and say, hey, listen, let's come back in 5 minutes. And you practice it. It's really simple stuff, but we don't. We're not prepared for a relationship. How are things going to be addressed? It's not okay to say, well, I don't want to talk about because it triggers me. It's like, well, if you're married, no, you don't get to do that to your spouse. If you're doing that to your spouse, you are literally abusing your spouse. If you're shutting down the communications that way, you need to go into counseling. And if you keep doing it and you don't go into counseling, you are unwilling and you're not reciprocating communication. You're destroying your relationship. Bam. Can I have a little bit of bam? Seriously, happens all the time. You're not special. In fact, it just this stuff is so common. It's people think I've got tarot cards going, I'm psychic, and it's not. It's just the data is there. The odds are so much in favor of why. Oddly enough, sexual infidelity is not the reason why it's like 12% of reasons why relationships end. What's more interesting is why there's infidelity. And the couples that are willing to look at that and heal that usually end up being stronger. Kind of interesting. Sex shouldn't rule our lives. It's thrown at us as this thing, and all the religions want to control it. God's interested in it. Really cares about your penis and sex organs. Just saying. It was a revelation when I looked up into the universes and pondered the billions of universes out there and things, and like, wow, I don't think he cares about that part of my anatomy as much. And then I had a friend who um, she talked about, she was really into cats and how cats mated. And I never watched cats mated. Then I watched how cats mated one night. Like, whoa, learned a lot about her, and which was interesting. And yeah, so yeah, nature is kind of wild, isn't it? So the point is, your relationship is not going to survive because everything in our modern world is stacked against you. There's an industry against your children to make money off from them, your pain and suffering. There's an industry against each of you individually and collectively as a couple. There's a legal industry. You are a money making fountain of big bucks. And it is what it is. So you have to figure something out, because I'll tell you, the crap that was written about thousands of years ago doesn't work in the modern era. And guess what? It didn't work back then either. All right. References for entertainment. Okay, so this is actually belongs down here. Not there, but that's okay. So let's say you're in a relationship and your relationship's coming to an end, or you think it's coming to an end. Okay, so I've got a thing here called endings. So I know I'm growing long, but I'm just going to keep going with this because we got to get through it. If you're going to end a relationship, regardless if there's kids or not, the context to hold is mutual success moving forward. Most people, it's mutual destruction because that's what's most profitable for the people giving you financial and legal advice. Haha, you have rights. You need to exercise your rights. And here, write me a check for $20,000 retainer. And this will probably be, maybe about $150,000, but he's going to pay for it. Don't worry about it. Or she's going to pay for it. I mean, seriously, it is insane. I had a friend who was a lawyer, and what did him in as a lawyer was when a couple spent a few months fighting tens of thousands of dollars over who's going to get to keep their daughter's urn. Yeah, pretty creepy shit. All right. So if you find out like, holy shit, man, because relationships an investment, right? So you're gonna break up, you're gonna end your marriage or your marital type relationship, significant relationship, kids, no kids. It's gonna take you 3 years to heal. Most likely you're not gonna heal. You're gonna go into another relationship and move that mental, emotional, neurochemical addiction to somebody else. And by then it's gonna be too late. Or 3 years. How long has it been? How long have you been in a relationship? That is an investment. I'm just bringing some reality here. That is an investment. Are you willing to exit that trade? Is it really gone? Or is it you didn't have the right tools? Weren't holding the right contexts? Usually, unless there's domestic violence involved, it's usually mutual. Somebody wasn't listening, not reciprocating. Lines were drawn in the sand. Needs weren't stopped being met. Blah 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 blah. This is a cycle, right? And then you got TV, entertainment, advertising, marketing, social media to support your perspective. Name the religious ideology or spiritual ideology, and you will find a support for the men and the women to edify breaking up because you get to be part of that club. We're so sorry, club, because that's what everyone else is doing, club, because 52% of everyone's going to, on their first relationship, the stats after the first relationship are through the roof. It's amazing you made it this far. Pat yourself on the back. But what if you want to rethink that a little bit? What if you were to have a conversation about willingness and reciprocating? What if you were to sit there and say, huh, I wasn't willing to. What if you were to make a list of where you could take responsibility for things and you were to go up to your partner and say, listen, babe, I wasn't willing to listen to you on this list of things, and I wasn't supporting you around these sort of things, and I wasn't reciprocating these things. You know that little thing you like in the bedroom? Well, you know what? You told me about that like 2 years ago, and I really wasn't listening, and I could have been doing it. It wasn't a big deal. I mean, whatever it is, you could own it. It's a POTU thing. Own what belongs to you, nothing more, nothing less. Well, David, or she's gotta be willing to meet me halfway. No, absolutely not. It's not about him or her. It's about you. Your honor is your own, male, female, husband, wife, boy, girl, whatever you are. Your honor is your own. So you be honorable. You do what's right. Now, if someone wants to pin something on you, someone wants to defame you, someone wants to make up lies about you, that's fine. You only explain yourself once. I taught this to my kids. If you're ever interviewed, police pull you over, whatever, you have to explain something, you explain it once. If they keep asking you questions, it's time to get a lawyer. Seriously. I mean, not in this context, but the question is when you know what the truth is and you've already said the truth, don't keep talking. There's nothing more that needs to be said. And if someone's going to disrespect you by keep asking you a question, they're not worthy of another breath until they figure it out. It's not a power move. It just is honoring yourself, honoring the truth. You are what? Thou art what? Divine. So be that. Bring that love, bring that context to this conversation. Don't have a list of what they did or didn't do. That's up for them to figure out. You reclaim your honor in the relationship. If they're willing to do the same, great. If not, that's okay. Maybe they might start asking questions. Maybe you can have a conversation. If you haven't been to relationship counseling, find someone on here that is data-driven consulting, counseling based on Gottman. Be my suggestion. Don't go to your church or your synagogue or your mosque. I know that's offensive to a lot of people. It can work if both parties are in total alignment with the principles they are being ruled over by, which usually mean the woman has to be in total submission to the man, and that doesn't work. Not for her happiness. Now, if she's not happy, he's going to know that she's only doing it because of the rules. And if that's the only reason why she's doing it, he'll never be fulfilled as a man. He could be a sheik with billions of dollars and he'll never be happy, right? Because his relationships aren't based on love, isn't based on him being a god, because he's not worshiping her as divine. She's property. Property can never truly love its owner, right? I don't think so. It has a high failure rate. And, I just don't think it works. This is coming from a guy that was in some of those belief systems where I was told what my authority and power was, and I knew there was something wrong with it. It took me a decade or so to figure out what was wrong with it, but at the time, I just knew it was wrong. So if you want to create or recreate your relationship, let's say you were married. Here's a mistake I made. I should have taken the pamphlet with my wedding vows and framed it and put it on alongside my bed on both sides of our bed. And every night before I went to bed, I should have read my vows to myself. Didn't need to read it out loud, just to myself. And I should have had a picture or some of the pictures that really stirred my heart next to my bed so that every time I went to bed and every time I woke up, no matter what schedule I was working on, I saw us. Yeah. If I were to walk you around my house, you would see pictures of Diana and myself and life affirming and relationship affirming messages everywhere. Like over here, there's one. There's no pictures. We took them down because of the holiday change. I still fall for you every day is a message. Over here, it says, I choose you. Over here, there's just a picture of a heart. It's just everywhere. Everywhere I look on the refrigerator. One of the first things Diana did was, she didn't even know this. She put a picture of her and me on her refrigerator. I almost cried. She had no idea what that meant to me. I was in a relationship where my picture wasn't anywhere. And it got to me. And I made it known, and my needs weren't being met. That was a tough pill to swallow. I'll tell folks that. Are you in the picture? I never realized the importance of this till later in life. So I would put up, you need to weaponize your environment for your success, for your relationship. And you need to get rid of all downer stuff. I don't care where it comes from, right? And I usually will get rid of all past stuff, anything that reminds me of anything that doesn't inspire me to love, peace, and joy or edify my relationship. It gets donated or gifted somewhere else. I just learned that the hard way too. I have a tendency to hang on to things, not necessarily hoard things. And if you're not married, have you said vows in your relationship? Let me give you one. This is one that I just make sure it's okay to say. All right. Here's an example. I vow to love, honor, and be true to you for all the days of my life and beyond. I'll say it again. I vow to love, honor, and be true to you for all the days of my life and beyond. Yeah. And that's something else. That's part of a whole nother concept that I can write about. I have written a whole book about. It's about bonding and cementing in a relationship. But, whatever your vows are, most likely, if you're thinking about splitting up, it's because you have remove them from your life path. You're not seeing them. They're not consciously. Their life has intruded into your relationship. Stress, reality. Yeah. It's not about fighting. This is really, there's no need for fighting. Fighting is willingness. But Gottman Institute, Gottman.com, Gottman.com. And the other, if you've gone through a breakup, the journey from abandonment to healing is good. Now, regarding endings, right? I didn't have a chance to really go into this. So there's different types of endings. So like if you have biological kids, if there's domestic violence and abuse involved, you have to be careful because what you think you might be able to win in court, you probably aren't going to. Especially out to message to the ladies, but men too. If your partner is an abuser, you need to move slowly. You need to find out what your legal rights are in your county. You need to understand that there's 3 different agencies of law enforcement. There's your city police, which is governed by a city council, which can often be corrupted. There is your county police, which is an elected sheriff, and then there's your state police. And if you're in a certain county and there's, shit happens, there is corruption out there, right? We know this, right? You have to do your research first. You need to find an advocate that understands the type of abuse you're going into, safety. I mean, seriously, you need to do it slowly. You need to actually find out what evidence is in your state and your county, and you need to get it and secure it before your abuser knows what you're doing. Because the moment they do, they can, and especially if they have any kind of financial means, they have subnets of how to abuse and use the legal system to take advantage. Project defamation, all sorts of cool things. Munchausen by proxy, all sorts of cool things that no one can prove. Hell on earth. So, if you have kids, proceed with caution. Uh, it all boils down to the golden rule, even if you're the victim. If the honorable party gets power and control, they can force the dishonorable party into counseling and healing. And then you can context mutual success moving forward. That includes to your criminal abuser, right? I know that's a high standard to hold. But if you were them, isn't that how you'd want to be held? You'd want to be cornered. They'll only respect power, narcissistic sociopath, right? They have no other choice but to follow your rules, and you're demanding that they get help. That's how you win against one of them. If you're not willing to do that, you will lose against them because they will ruthlessly destroy you. And they'll enjoy a peanut butter sandwich while you're suffering. And they won't lose any sleep over it because they have a mental emotional disorder for any number of reasons, clinical or otherwise. Just be aware of what you're dealing with. Those are some hard lessons. I got to observe it firsthand. And the abuser people, they're usually survivors of some really horrific shit themselves. So if there's kids involved and they're your kids, you're going to be tied together anyway. So my suggestion there is figure out how to stay together. All possible. If there's domestic abuse and violence, obviously you can't for your safety and the safety of your children, right? In that case, you still need to be very strategic about it. Okay. If there's stepkids involved, or that you're in that role, step parent role, usually how this works is when the relationship ends, so do all those relationships. It doesn't have to be that way, but usually that's the end game, and it's sad, especially if you've spent any time together and you've bonded as a family. The kids are innocents in this, and they don't fully understand that, even if they're teenagers, and all it is just another failed relationship. But it's also an opportunity if the relationship isn't related in domestic abuse and violence. Whatever you're doing in the relationship, it is an opportunity to demonstrate how to handle a bad situation or maybe even turn it around. There's nothing more exciting than to see a bad relationship where the two people make a decision to recreate it. I believe our ultimate superpower is our ability to create. Okay. Make the decision to create it. Make the decision to be willing, right? And to reciprocate. Make the decision to work on each other, themselves, and figure out what went wrong. And just that is the example we are really missing in our society right now. I'm not talking about toughing it out. I'm talking about recreating because there was a reason why you got together in the relationship. There was a reason that brought you together. I can name you all the spiritual mumbo jumbo stuff about, oh, we're on the flow and, we were on the journey together. Now our journey's ended and blah, blah, blah. And that all may be true and valid, or it may just be a justification for not being willing to reciprocate the work necessary to build the relationship of your dreams because you're not going to find it. Realize that you're not going to find it. You're going to have to create it. Let me say that again. You will never find the relationship of your dreams. You're going to have to create it. You're going to have to create it within yourself to become the person. They're going to have to reciprocate within themselves, and then you're going to have to do it together. I've only seen it happen once in my life, and I'm 6 years into that experiment, and so far it's amazing. My only regret is I didn't have this knowledge like 30 years ago. I can tell you, except for a couple isolated situations with what I know now, every one of my relationships could have been a thriving success if there was willingness and reciprocation with the knowledge that I have now, most of which I've shared here, could have turned any of those relationships around. And the one that couldn't almost did, but they weren't willing. And it was because of their own deep, deep um, indoctrinations into abuse. And breaks my heart whenever I think about it. So close. So I'm going to wrap up here on the endings. Oh, and if there are no children involved and stuff like that, it depends on your age group and the cycle of life where you're at. But usually, moving on. And moving on for me is usually just boxing the stuff up. And if I want to keep memories, great. But usually it's just boxing stuff up and getting rid of it, or maybe hang on to it for a while. Rule of three things, right? Um, I can do a quick rule of three. Is like it's about not reacting. So like your reptilian brain causes a reaction up to 3 seconds ahead of your conscious brain. That's why, when something's flying at you and you hit it, you didn't consciously think about it, you just did it right. That was your reptilian brain protecting you. Okay, so that's how a police officer can fire half a clip of rounds into a 12-year-old who's unarmed because his reptilian brain took over because he was afraid and he didn't have proper training, situational training or ethics, or armed properly for these situations because he wasn't prepared to practice. So his reptilian brain took over because he was afraid. 3 seconds is a long time. You can fire off a lot of rounds. So we know this. We have the data on this, but we're not using that data. So anything happen, good or bad, pause 3 seconds. Then wait 3 minutes, 3 hours, 3 days, 3 months. No, 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 quarters, 3 years. And the timeline is based upon the seriousness of the decision. And it's all about getting to peace. Okay. Maybe setting boundaries. So like when I had a relationship come to an end, I set a 90-day timeline. But first I had a heart attack, actually, is what happened. That's why I couldn't breathe. So I got to 3 minutes breathing, and then 3 hours, and then 3 days, and then 3 weeks, and then 3 months. And then I set an end date at 3 months. And setting that for myself was very healing because I didn't have to agonize hanging out. And I said these things needed to happen. That was between me and the universe. In order for me to open a door again, I needed a list of things to happen. It was an extreme situation. And those things almost happened once. It was almost magical. It was in the middle of the night. Got a phone call, which was unusual in the situation. And it was perfect timing, but didn't quite make it. And it's okay. I honored my standard in that scenario. It wasn't a legal marriage. Um, it just it was a deeply sad things that transpired. Um, very disrespectful and and non-honoring at very, very many deep levels, considering the circumstances too. So anyway, everything's situation, but that's the process. Rule of three. Um, and when something ends, no, it's a 3-year healing process. So like when Diane and I began dating and stuff like that, I gave her full disclosure of my timelines, and we just never dated anyone else. We just didn't want to. It's kind of interesting. I have a tendency in those scenarios that when I'm betrayed for whatever reason, you have to work through things and face things out, and then I just divorce, out of sight, out of mind, delete people from my life. Those people from my lives. I don't want to think about them. I don't want to. It's like when you go to the restroom, right? You take a good dump, right? You flush it. Relationship wise, so many people go, they take a good dump, but they don't flush it, and they keep going back to the toilet. They keep the pictures, they keep the love letters, they keep all that crap, and it's sewage in their lives now. It's toxic to them. Box it up, seal it, box it up for 3 years. If things don't come full circle in 3 years, have a ritual burning or something, or take the stuff to Goodwill or whatever. But don't keep going back to the toilet and playing around with the sewage and eating it and smelling it and savoring the pain. It's icky. Sorry if that grossed anybody out, but sometimes people need to be grossed out because that's exactly what it's like. All right, wrapping up here, references and entertainment. So, Homo Dukes, there's a little thing in there. It's talking about humanity's future tomorrow. It's about dating. A short, not the book isn't, but there's a section in there. Yeah, it's about AI. It's really, really good. Journey from Abandonment to Healing. Everyone should read the chapter about the shattering. The rest of the book is excellent too. Battle of the Sexes. So there's a very funny and interesting dude out there. I think is he from Armenia? I don't know. It's called Man Talk on YouTube. Very offensive. So if you're a feminist type person, nothing wrong with that. I am. I support women's rights and stuff like that. You'll be offended by what he has to say. But what's interesting is a lot of what he's talking about, a lot of men are listening to. And he actually trolls TikTok and stuff, and uses examples of things that women are talking about and points out to them and then critiques them from his chauvinistic perspective. And I don't agree with a lot of what he is saying, but I also don't agree with a lot of what, the women are saying and perpetuating out there too. But there's some really interesting perspectives that he's putting out there. And there's a lot of things that happen out there for men to be aware of, and there's some things in there that I hadn't considered that I may have been a victim of throughout my life. And it's not about men versus women. It's about it's makes sense for me to be learning about the tactics that women learn that can be used against me as a man. It makes sense for a woman to learn about the tactics that men are being taught, which are being used to manipulate them. And it's also good to have an understanding of how we are hurting each other. And anyway, I like his content. I don't agree with a lot of his content. As a man, I find some of his content both offensive and funny. I know as a woman, I would be offended by a lot of his content, but I think he makes some interesting points. And right now, we live still in a society and world where men still rule, and understanding why they have the perspectives they have, what their fears are, and how they have been abused, I think is healthy if we want to get to a point where we have equal rights and equality amongst our genders. I think understanding the existing regime that rules, I think he really does a good job of bringing to life an understanding of why men think the way they do. I don't agree with a lot of what he does, but I find it funny and humorous. Reality entertainment. I really don't necessarily like reality shows, but I found Love Is Blind to be interesting as an experiment where people get to know each other and propose without ever seeing each other. So they're removing the visual, right? Pre-screen kind of thing. And it not only is entertaining, but it's really something good to watch with your spouse or your partner because you can talk about what you're seeing happening, how people are playing each other, deception by the man and by the woman. It's really, I think, it's a way of talking about things through a third party in entertainment because some real life shit shows up that may or may not be related to anything you might be experiencing in your relationship. But anyway, I find that interesting. And then a new one, Diana and I are having a lot of fun with called Marriage at First Sight. It's like people that have just they were match made by professionals. I think one dude was a pastor, one was a marriage counselor, and anyway, they went through this thing and they agreed to get married. And the first time they saw each other was the day they got married. They didn't have a choice not to get married, and they went on a honeymoon, and then they had to move in together. And then after 8 weeks, they can decide to get a divorce or something like that, which I think is a little wrong because they just made vows, right? Statistically, the data shows that arranged marriages or marriages that have been arranged by a professional matchmaker have a higher probability of success than how we do it, right? So that's interesting to me. And but seeing how they work and deal with issues is like it's a crucible of a social sciences type experiment in any way. It could be interesting if you're a couple of you having challenges, watching other people's challenges together as entertainment and talking about it, pausing, stuff like that could be interesting. I found the entertainment one out of England called Sex Education to be absolutely amazing. It's kind of like American Pie on steroids, updated, but dealing with some really cool, interesting real life issues, especially younger generation issues. I think it just brilliant. Um, a lot of older folks my age and older might not understand it, or they might be offended by some of it, or like, wow, that's really crazy. Uh, and another one, the same thing, a different country, forget what it was. It's dubbed over. Is this one came out of was it Poland? Sexify. Absolutely hilarious. But absolutely just it was just to me it's brilliant. Some of the things that mess us up is our sex and sexuality and our inability to face who and what we are as animals. Ooh, we're not animals, we're humans. Now, yeah, we're animals, but we can have that argument. But the thing is we refuse, we deny, and then we have all these supposed to be's and shoulds and shouldn'ts and all these rules and regulations, and then we intermix our moralities and our ethics and the religious precepts of allowing long dead people to rule our lives. Well, it's no, David, they're not long dead people. It's the living God. It's like, well, no, long dead people wrote their interpretations of what they thought your living God had to say. My point there would be, well, why don't you have a communication with your living God instead of relying on somebody else? Crickets. No, I'm not. I mean, seriously, all powerful, almighty, divine, right? He has no need of a prophet, a preacher, or a translator. Nothing wrong with gathering together for community. Great, right? No one needs to be spoon feeding you or IVing you stuff. You need to be making that direct connection, Christ-like kind of thing, right? Yeah, prayer, meditation, still small voice stuff, right? You've read that, right? You've heard of it. All the belief systems have it, right? All right. Don't mean to harp on it. There's a new one. I haven't gotten too far into it called Alpha Male, just hilarious. I've been avoiding it because it seems stereotypical and watching it's hilarious. It's not as good as the other ones. I think The Love Is Mine and Marriage at First Sight are kind of good. And there's probably some other ones out there. But my point is those are real people going through real things. Some of it's scripted and unscripted, right? Um, but watching a crucible and condensation of human behaviors, how people think, their biology at play, their game, their heart, their baggage, all that stuff, in our real lives, it's just it's either hidden or comes out in little bits and pieces. But when it's concentrated like that, we can start seeing things about ourselves or our relationships or past relationships that give us insights. Anyway, I think it's got value. I think it's got value. All right. So we're coming up on not quite 2 hours. So this actually went better than I thought it would be. Is there anything I have missed so far? Let me see here. I have a chat window thing. Has anyone asked me any questions while I've been online here? No. I don't think there's anybody watching this. So I've been talking to myself for 2 hours. So that's cool. There's a lot of good things here that I'll probably just go back through and fix or cut out different pieces of. So ending the relationship, I want to revisit that. Most people create hell on earth, mutually assured destruction. Um, and there's a lot of data coming out about young men aren't wanting to get married and things like that. And the man talk dude actually gets into that to a certain extent. And he's not 100% accurate on some of his perceptions, but some of them he is accurate with. Um, uh, Both men and women are afraid for good reasons. And what's funny is in America today, like money, for example, it probably takes a family of 4 working adults to have stable finances, right? So that's a polyamorous community scenario or couples that are partnering up for business purposes, although that's hard, that's hard to make work because we can't make we can't make a relationship between 2 people work yet successfully. So, it's hard. That had nothing to do with money either. A lot of folks, lots of money, can't make it work. It's just kinda crazy. All right, that is all I have for everybody today. Um, I hope this was interesting, and, yeah, I'm tired. So, just, I hope this was of value. I hope the people I have to trust that those who, yeah, I moved this over here so you can see what I'm seeing, right? So that's how tired I am. That's not what I meant to do. I have all these different things I can play as I'm signing off. So, uh, yeah, like, subscribe, share. Most of this channel here, I'm working on stuff regarding my authoring. A lot of this stuff right now is focused on cryptocurrency and things, and so, but yeah, it's time for me to wrap this up. Everyone, have a great whenever you're watching this, and we'll we'll catch you another time. I'll end this with I should have done this earlier, my little disclaimer thing. No, that's not even appropriate for this. I'm not a licensed anything for anything, so all this is just my opinions. I always recommend folks. I think I did that. Seek out some professional counseling, but do it based on. Did I get the Gottman? Find out what kind of philosophy and data and research the counseling is standing on, type of thing. All right, that's all I got for you guys. Have a good one. I'll just turn this off here.